Um, Hello, guys who are on today. Really nice to be with you tonight, and thank you, Tam, for having me. I really appreciate it. So my name is Ali, and I am the founder of this little company called Fizzy Kids. But basically, at the end of the day, I am just a mum to two kids who've got special, additional, and emotional needs. So just before we start, I need to make sure that we're all ready. Right, now settle down, everybody, please, and stop fidgeting, you in the corner. Can you show me you're listening? Yeah, look me in the eye when I am talking to you. No, do not talk back at me. I'm talking and I expect you to do as you're told. I've asked you to do a really simple thing. Come on, time waits for no man, hurry up. And you, yeah, you at the back there, just calm down and pull yourself together. I mean, it's not like the world's ending, is it? Okay, so you'll be really pleased to know that I am not going to talk like that for the rest of the session, but I like to start with that because if nothing else tonight, I would love it if you could have an hour to yourself for a start. Because that's really important to just take some time for yourself, even if you're learning stuff or trying something new. But also, secondly, because I am going to challenge you a bit, because I'm going to try and make you think a little bit differently about some of the stuff that you're saying and doing with your kids. So I'm just going to share my screen now, Tam, if that's okay, because I've got a few slides that I just like to work through. And let me just get it into slideshow. There we go. Okay. So I haven't got many slides because really this is just about engaging with you guys. And because we're a relatively small audience, if you've got questions, feel free to just chip in at any point. I want it to be quite informal. So I just give you a really brief introduction to me. I have two fizzy kids, as I like to call them, and my eldest is autistic, dyspraxic. He has sensory processing disorder, and he also has trauma relating to adverse childhood experiences when he was younger. My youngest child doesn't have any learning difficulties. All his fizziness comes from his emotions. He has something called attachment disorder because both of my kids were adopted when they were quite young. And I always start by being really honest. So my journey to where I am today started, as these journeys quite often do, right at the lowest point. I was sitting in the doctor's surgery, crying, depressed. I was about to accept her offer of antidepressants. I just felt like my world was falling apart. We just couldn't hold our family together. Everything we were trying, nothing was changing. They were out of control. We were out of control. And really, I guess we were at just such an incredibly low point that we didn't know what else to do. And so after a couple of fairly big events, we decided that things had to change. And I guess when you make that decision in yourself, you're kind of empowering yourself anyway. So it already felt good to have made that decision to make that change. But what I didn't know was what to do and how to do things differently. So I started reading books, I started going on courses, I started working with psychiatrists and psychologists and occupational therapists and play therapists, and I mean just a multitude of wonderful, amazing professionals who've got so much knowledge. But at the end of the day, what I realised is that when you're a parent, the buck stops with you. However many amazing professionals you've got on board with your kids, you're the one that's there when they're having their meltdown at home. So I had a bit of a light bulb moment, if you like, in the shower, because what I suddenly realized, oh, that sounds really bad. Like I didn't electrocute myself. I just, yeah, you get it. I guess what really struck me, and when I started to delve into some of these parenting theories and ideas around mindful parenting, intentional parenting, gentle parenting, therapeutic parenting, what became really clear is that actually so much power comes from what we say and how we say it. And so I started to develop this parenting language. And it was something that became very tangible to me, something I could learn something I could do differently, something I could practice, and something I could tell my partner, my children's teachers, my parents about, so that they could do things differently too. So just to kind of really wanted to give you the sense of who I am. So I'm always very honest. I am not a professional in terms of a parenting coach or a psychologist. I've worked with all of those people. They have helped me develop this language, but I always say at the end of the day, I'm just a mum. So you're going to get the kind of point of view today from me as somebody who's now kind of built this into a profession, but actually is somebody who just lives it every day with my own kids. All right, so we're going to work through today, really helping you understand why these kids who have got this fizziness about them, why they might require a different parenting approach. Well, they're going to help you become more aware of the language that you're currently using with your kids. And then we're going to start helping you to relearn the way you communicate with your kids. And what I would love more than anything from tonight is that you walk away with 1 or 2 little nuggets that you can go and try out straight away. Okay, so if they're up and they were meant to be in bed, hopefully you'll have something different to say to them than you would do already. I just want to make a comment quickly, because obviously you guys are Frollo and you are an amazing community. I have quite a few good friends in the village who've got kids with additional needs who are single parents. And before I came on tonight, I said to one of them, what can I say so that I can show that I empathise with single parents? And she just said, acknowledge that it's flipping impossible. So there we go. This is me as a non-single parent sitting in front of you guys tonight saying, I acknowledge that, especially if you've got kids with additional and emotional needs, that life can feel flipping impossible some days. She actually used a different F word, but I don't want to get sensitive tonight, so I'm going to say flipping. What I do know, and what she has done very successfully, is build a network of support around her. She will call me if she needs me to come to a meeting at school, because she doesn't want to sit and take notes and also do the talking, and she wants to get a second viewpoint. So all I would say specifically to you guys tonight is, who within your network, or maybe they don't exist yet, maybe you need to go out there and ask specifically who in your network can help with your kids, because you will need extra help. I know that for sure. I can barely manage with me and my husband, let alone by myself. Okay, so I just wanted to acknowledge that up front. All right, so let's get into it. What makes some kids fizzy? And they are fabulous, right? Fizzy kids are fabulous as well. They've got so much character, but they react to day-to-day situations in really quite different ways than other kids. So when you've got a fizzy kid or fizzy kids, some of you may have 2 or more, you kind of reach that stage when you know that your child sees and feels the world quite differently. So they might have a diagnosis of ADHD, autism, anxiety disorder, social disorders, dyslexia, or maybe they've been through some kind of specific traumatic episode of some kind. And we'll come on to those in a bit more detail in a bit. Or you might have a child who has no diagnosis or hasn't been through a traumatic event, but they are highly sensitive. And maybe they're just taking a bit longer than other kids to reach emotional maturity. And some of these behaviours can be quite extreme. And for any of those of you out there who are dealing with extreme behaviours, I always say this, that it's really important to get help with extreme behaviours, particularly if they're getting physical, and not to suffer in silence. So if those kind of behaviours are persisting and nothing you are doing is making a difference, it's really important you get outside help, because child on parent violence, parental burnout, they are real things, okay? So some of these behaviours, they could be shouting, screaming. Maybe they're persistently rude to you or to other family members. Maybe they hit or kick or punch or bite, or maybe they just threaten to do those things. Maybe your kids are breaking things or defacing things on purpose, or because they're so angry and aggressive that they don't know how else to get that emotion out. It could be quite at the other end. So fizzy behaviours can be hiding away. Maybe they're silent or mute and they won't talk. Perhaps your child's school refusing, or maybe they're excessively lying or stealing or hoarding. It might even be that they're being really controlling or very contradictory. That was my youngest this morning. Oh my goodness, I could not say anything right. Everything I said, no, it wasn't. Or no, it's not like that, Mum. No, you're wrong. So even those very controlling, contradictory natures can become quite fizzy and quite extended if a child carries on doing them. Maybe they've got sensory input requirements. So maybe your child likes to get sensory input from licking things, chewing things, touching things, or they might have a high sensitivity, I don't know, to sound, or maybe to textures. Maybe you've got a kid who suddenly puts a sock on that they've worn for 3 weeks and all of a sudden they're like, get it off me, get it off me. So all of these behaviours are signs that your kids need something different in terms of the support that they're seeking and looking for. And all of these behaviours are just the tip of the iceberg. And it's really hard to say this, but those behaviours, there'll be so much more behind them. And I'm sure you guys will know that. And it is so hard to see beyond those behaviours sometimes. Really, really hard. But that's ultimately what we've got to try and do. All right, let's look at a few of the reasons why your child might be displaying some of these big behaviours, these big feelings that turn into big behaviours. I'm going to start with stress and overwhelm because it's not just for grown-ups, and that's why I sometimes call it overwhelm, not stress, because I think sometimes people think that stress is just saved for adults. It's for the adult who's got a difficult job or a financial problem or a relationship problem. No, your child can suffer with stress as well. So there's this little part of your brain called the amygdala. I'm going to get scientific just for a moment. And this little part of your brain is proportionately tiny, but it has a disproportionately large effect on the way we react to stress. So let's call it the fizzy bit, because I like everything to be a bit fizzy. And that little tiny bit in your brain, it can override every part of your and your child's rational mind, because that is exactly what it was designed to do. So it's your primary brain. It's the instinctive bit. It's the bit that would basically keep us all alive if we lived in the wild. And this little fizzy bit is functional in a child from birth, and it's fully developed by the time you're 18 months old. It's not part of your thinking brain, okay? It's your emotional brain. It senses threats and it sends out stress hormones for the brain to deal with that threat in the appropriate way. But in kids who are fizzy, sometimes that little part of their brain is working too well. And it might mean that they go into survival mode really quickly. So they go into that fight, flight, freeze mode really quickly. Or it might be that they go into it and just get stuck there and they don't quite know how to get out. So this is the case for many fizzy kids, okay? They may have an imbalance in their brain of chemicals such as serotonin, which give you that kind of happy, good feeling. Stress, ultimately, if you speak to any psychiatrist, lies in anxiety. Okay, so at the root of most stresses lies anxiety. So if you've got a child who is spending too much time in survival mode or gets stuck in survival mode, then it's highly likely that they are dealing with stuff and that they just cannot deal with day-to-day stuff. So let's try and see the struggling child rather than seeing the bad child or the naughty child. So the second reason why your kid may be fizzy is because they've actually got a diagnosed additional or special need, such as my eldest son. And it is now scientifically acknowledged that these children will probably struggle to regulate their emotions and result in big behaviours. So it's going to make them more fizzy than others. And this might be directly linked to their disorder. So if you've got a child who's got ADHD, they are likely to be more hyperactive because that is part of that disorder. But you might have a child who's got some kind of anxiety disorder and is also hyperactive. And that's because sometimes things like hyperactivity can basically be a coping mechanism, if you like, for that anxiety. So if you're feeling really worried about something, what better way than just to go crazy, right? Run around, jump on the bed, throw things, speak a lot, speak really quickly, move around a lot. Actually, that hyperactivity can come from different things. So when you've got a child with an additional or special need, it's important that we start seeing their behaviours as can't do something rather than won't do something. And people get a bit hung up on this. They say things to me like, yeah, but what if my child's just being annoying? You know, what if they're just winding me up on purpose? You know, what if they really won't do something rather than can't? And I guess my question back to them is always this. Does it matter? Does it matter whether your child can't do something or won't do something? Because actually, if you're trying to deal with your child in a different way and give yourself and them better tools to manage those big feelings, then you can actually deal with won't and can't in the same way, in a respectful, intentional, therapeutic way. And the final reason for kids with fizzy behaviours might be because of some kind of adverse childhood experience. So this could be a trauma. It could have happened in utero. It could have been because of a trauma in their early years. It can also be to do with bereavements, divorce, all kinds of things that a child might go through that gives them basically just a kind of a higher level of stress. And these are likely to be for quite specific periods, so maybe shorter periods of time. They can even be related to a child having to be in hospital a lot post-birth, or maybe a birth mother's had really high cortisol levels in her body during that pregnancy. So the important thing to remember with these children is that those fizzy behaviours might come and go. So they might not be an autistic child who will always to some degree be dealing with those behaviours, but they could be somebody who has got some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, and as a result of that, they're presenting with these behaviours. What I would say here is this. Whatever the reason for your child's fizziness, it's now scientifically and neurologically proven that stress, learning difficulties, trauma have a significant impact on a brain. So your child, even if they're classed as neurotypical, if they've been through some kind of adverse childhood experience, or they're dealing with high levels of stress, their brains will be wired differently. And I think once we can start to accept this, then we can understand it. And then we can maybe consider or reconsider how we parent them. It's really easy to say things like, oh, well, it worked for me, so it's good enough for them. We are not our children. They are completely different to us in so many ways. So for us, with our fizzy kids, it was really just about acknowledging that they were different to us and then relearning to be the parents that they needed us to be, not the parents that we were parented to be, okay? And that's what we're going to start to move on now. So what we're going to do now is a little exercise, and I would love it if you could listen in to these phrases which I'm going to use, because I would really like you today to start to become aware, really aware of those things that you're saying to your kids, that parenting language that you're using. So here we go. I'm going to give you my core scripts, and we'll talk a bit more about what core scripts are in a minute. But basically, they are those things that you say where you think, oh, I sound just like my mum. God, I sound just like my Uncle Jones when I say that. They're so familiar to you that they just pop out here and there without you even noticing them. Okay, so here are mine. Sit up straight at the table. Look me in the eye when I'm talking to you. Oh, calm down, will you? You're 8 years old. You should be able to do that by now. How dare you talk to me like that? Do as I say, not as I do, please. If you talk back at me, you are in deep trouble. So I'm just going to give you a moment. Consider which ones of those, if any, are familiar to you, and just try and spend a minute or two writing down some of the things that you feel pop up in your language when you're talking to your kids. I'll just give you 1 minute to do that. Okay, so what I want you to think about now in more detail are the effects that these things that you're saying are having on your kids. So are they helping you? Are they helping you in challenging situations with your kids when they're displaying some of those big fizzy behaviours, when they're hitting or threatening or hiding away or kicking or throwing toys or breaking things? If those kind of phrases are popping up, are they getting you the results that you want in that moment? How do they make your kids feel? How do they make you feel when you're saying them? Because the likelihood is that you're saying them in a situation when things are really tough. So there's a high probability that they're making you more stressed, they're making your child more stressed, and they're going to leave you both in survival mode with that primary brain, that fizzy bit we talked about, highly engaged. So it's really important then to start thinking about the fact that our children cannot necessarily control that move into their survival brain, and that we are triggering them even more by some of the language we might be using. So the only real thing a new parenting language is doing is it's helping you and your child slow down that move into the primary brain, the instinctive brain, the survival mode, because you're going to be using language and phrases that help to engage the secondary brain, the thinking part of your brain. All right, so that's your aim here, really. You're trying to regulate, you're trying to co-regulate with your child. You're not really giving them any space, any triggers to make things worse. And maybe you can think about it like this. There's this great kind of behaviour ladder that Brian Post came up with. He talked about trying to move Fizzy Kids down the behaviour ladder from behaviours to feelings to attitudes. So what I mean by those are behaviours might be, if your child's really angry, a behaviour would be kicking or hitting or throwing things. If you can regulate them enough, then that angry child could shift to a point where they're presenting their feelings, not a behaviour. So instead of kicking you or throwing something at you, they might say, I hate you. Okay, that's a feeling. That's your child presenting a feeling to you. Even better, if you can then get your child to a point where they're just showing you an attitude, a roll of the eye, that's not fair, or a tut, or a huff, or a walking away. I tell you what, I longed for an eye roll or a that's not fair for years. That was my aim. I was like, I feel like I need to teach my children that they can say it's not fair. instead of turning everything into this enormous meltdown or tantrum. So that's what you're looking to do. You're trying to help your child stay regulated, stay more emotionally in control of themselves, because angry kids don't like being angry. Anxious kids don't want to be anxious. Kids who feel guilty for having done something wrong, they don't like that feeling. Children who hit or kick or throw things, they don't want to do that. Just like we as adults wouldn't want to do any of those things and don't like those feelings. So we've really got to start seeing our kids as struggling and do what we can to help move them out of that struggle. Okay, so let's get into a little bit more detail around some new parenting language and start to introduce some phrases. So I want to think about 3 core concepts around this new parenting language that you're going to go away and try out and be awesome at. The first one is this: in an emergency, go to A&E. That is not accident and emergency, fingers crossed for you guys, it's not accident and emergency. A&E in this case is accept and empathise. Okay, so accept their feeling and then show empathy with them. So let's think about a situation. Okay, your child comes home from school. Standard routine is they have a chocolate biscuit, a bit of squash, and then watch a bit of TV, and then it's dinner time. And your child has their biscuit and squash and then says, "Can I have another one?" And you say, no more chocolate biscuits, darling. It's nearly dinner. I don't want you to lose your appetite. You know, we only ever have one chocolate biscuit. And all hell breaks loose with your fizzy kid. Okay? There's tantruming, there's screaming, there's wailing, there's storming off, there's slamming doors, all because of a chocolate biscuit. But maybe what you didn't know is that they had a bad day at school. Maybe what you didn't know is that their packed lunchbox is still full because they missed their lunch. Maybe they're actually just really hungry and it's not about the chocolate biscuit, it's just about having something to eat. So remember that in that moment, your child's gone into survival mode. They're stressed, whatever it is, they're not feeling good. So if you stand there and go, "Hey, darling, that is not a reasonable reaction. It's nearly dinner time. We only ever have one biscuit. Stop overreacting, please." You are in your thinking brain, but your child is in their survival brain. You're talking different languages. You're basically having a nice conversation with yourself at that point. I hate to tell you that. So you've got to try and speak to your child in a way that that survival brain understands. So maybe try something like this instead. "Wow, you're so angry right now. And it's all about mummy not letting you have a biscuit. Oh, it's okay to feel angry. Yeah, you know, I might feel angry if someone said no to my favourite biscuit. I wonder what I can do to help right now." Okay, so what you're doing there is a few things. You're accepting their emotion. It's okay to feel angry. All right, you're saying that. You're letting them be angry. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to teach our kids not to be angry. That's not realistic. Anger is a normal human emotion. We just want them to learn to be angry in a better way. We want them to learn to express that anger through a feeling or an attitude, not a behaviour. And then you're empathizing. I might feel angry if someone said no to my favourite biscuit, right? If you put yourself back in the shoes of an 8-year-old, you want a chocolate biscuit, someone said no. And then you're offering help. I wonder what we can do to help you right now. Who can resist that? Who can resist help being offered? Especially not a child. So you're not giving the anger anywhere to go. You're not triggering more. You're not adding fuel to the fire. It's so easy to react with anger to anger. And my kid the other day, he was in the car and he was having a massive strop, like enormous, to the point where, you know, those strops they have in cars where you almost have to pull over. Yeah, it was one of those. And he literally just was going crazy, and he was like kicking the front seat of the car and like throwing all his stuff out of his school bag. And I did stop because it was safe to do so. And I let him cry it out, and I just sat there and I said, it's okay, I'm here for you, you're safe, you're going to be okay. And once he'd calmed himself down and regulated, I just said to him, you must have been so stressed to do something like that, because that's not like you. What can I do to help right now? All right, so it's really critical in those situations to find a way to not add fuel to the fire. All right, secondly, the second kind of main idea, connect before you correct. What do I mean by this? What this is really saying is that it's so important to stay connected to your kids, physically, emotionally, whenever you can. Create connection and stay connected, even through really difficult situations. So there might be, if you've got more than one kid, there might be a sibling fight going on. And you walk in and it's so easy to say, hey, stop hurting your brother right this second, or else you're going to lose all your screen time for a week. Okay. So if you've got kids who aren't Fizzy, you know, who haven't kind of necessarily displayed those big feelings and big behaviours, they might have heard that threat and thought, oh, okay, I get this. Mum's really angry. She said I'm going to lose screen time. I don't want to lose screen time. So, you know what? I'm going to back down. I'm going to back down now. But a Fizzy kid who's in survival mode, this is what they hear. Mum's saying something. It's just noise. Can't hear what. All I know is that I'm going to kill my brother because he took my favourite car. I'm in survival mode. I don't care a tiny bit about screen time. I'm going to fight to win. And that's the difference. That's what you're dealing with a Fizzy kid. They're in survival mode. They're not making sense of anything you said. So if you walk in with a threat, you're immediately breaking that connection you have with them. And you're also adding fuel to that fire again. So an alternative way of dealing with it would be to regain control of that situation, because you need to, because you're the grown-up and you want to stop anybody getting hurt. So you might put on what I call my sergeant major voice. And when we talk about language, we're going to mention this in a minute, and a parenting language, we're not just talking about our words. We're talking about body language. We're talking about our voice tone. So here's my sergeant major voice, which I've developed over the years. It stops me having to shout, but the idea is it's controlling and commanding. I am taking you away from your brother. It is my job to keep you both safe. You will not hit your brother. Okay, so you create safety in the situation, you regain control, and you then go away and you reconnect. So everyone goes, whoosh, and you do something with the child who is threatening to hit. You maybe share a chocolate biscuit. You maybe go and bounce the basketball outside. Whatever it is they like to do with you. You're reconnecting. And you do that before you discipline, correct, coach, teach, whatever it is you might want to do. And the power of that is unbelievable for a few reasons. Number one, you get to have the last word. Having the last word in an argument doesn't always have to happen at the time of the argument. In fact, it's much more powerful when you have the last word later on, when everyone's regulated, you're all back in your thinking brains, and actually your child can take on board learning and coaching and teaching. And that connection also means that when that situation happens again, they start to learn what to expect because they see you responding to these situations in a different way. Okay, number 3, the power of silence. Okay, don't worry, you don't need to check your microphone or your camera. You haven't lost connection. But what I did see there is that all of you who've got cameras on looked up. You looked up, you took an action, because silence is incredibly powerful. Even though we're talking about a parenting language, silence is absolutely part of that language. So when your child calls you an idiot or stupid or worse, it is possible to learn to be silent in response to them. An alternative might be walking away from your child, which is better for older children. So you could say something like this: Daddy's feeling a bit upset about what you just said. I'm going to go and think about how I'm feeling while I fold the washing. You're welcome to come and find me if you need me at any time. So it's powerful because only 7% of our language comes from words. The rest comes from the tone of our voice and body language. So silence is the absence of any verbal language, but it's not the absence of your body language, of your actions. And what I've noticed is that silence gives you that chance to re-regulate as the grown-up, to get your thoughts together, and then to respond to a situation in a better way. So the other night with my eldest child, I was in his room and he was being really rude to me. And I just said to him, you know, I think the best thing we can do right now is all get some rest and start again tomorrow. I love you. I'm going to go downstairs and fix the dinner now. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, he was downstairs, apologizing, asking me why I left. So silence gives your child the chance to rethink things as well. And quite often, it will mean that they can apologize for things without having to be asked. Okay, on the next few slides, I've got a couple more phrases. I'm not going to go through all of them, but Tam said I can send the presentation through so you can take your time to look at them when you've got your own time. So let's just go through 1 or 2 of them. Let's talk about the anxious moments. So I do a whole course on anxiety and language for anxiety. But one of the key things I find with anxiety, and when you're talking to it or talking to an anxious child, is that playfulness can be really, really powerful. So this is a kind of a playful phrase that I've used with my kids to help with their anxiety. So they might come downstairs when you put them to bed, they're all worried and they're thinking that there's a monster under the bed. You might say something like this: "There's a monster under your bed? Holy moly, that's awful. Well, no wonder you're finding it so hard to sleep. Right, come on, let me come upstairs and check. If I find that monster, I will get rid of them. And I will put a big sign on your door that says, 'Don't come back. Leave my daughter alone, monsters. Come and find me instead.'" So again, it would be so easy in that situation to say, "Oh, what are you doing downstairs again? Oh, for goodness sake, I've put you to bed 3 times. What is going on?" But just giving them a little bit of space, giving them a little bit of attention and connection and playfulness can be really useful in moments like that. What about when your child's being rude? This is a really hard one, and I talk about this a lot on my courses. But instead of shouting back at a rude child, instead of being rude back to a rude child, instead of talking back to a child who's talking back, and I'm being specifically challenging there are different things you can say to your kids. So maybe they've called you a rude name. Okay, happens in our house, probably happens in a lot of houses. Instead of saying, "How dare you talk to me like that?" or, "That's an awful thing to say, how rude," then you can just tone it down a little bit. And there's 3 different bullet points here that kind of tone it down a bit to toning it down a lot. But here's one of the phrases I would say: "Well, that was a rude thing to say. If you continue, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room with me until you feel ready to speak in the right way and follow our house rules. So you're acknowledging that it was rude. You're not shying away from that. It was rude. You've just said it firmly, but politely. You've said that if they continue to do that, you will take another action. You will leave the room with them. So I'm a big believer in time in, not time out, because of that need for connection in Fizzy Kids. If you disconnect from a Fizzy Kid, you just risk them becoming more fizzy over time. So you're suggesting you're going to take action, you're showing who's in charge, and you're being prepared to walk away. And there's a few more ideas there as well for other things you can say to a rude child. I'm just going to pick up on one more because I know it's late and everyone probably needs a cup of tea or a glass of wine before they go to bed. Although hopefully you're having one now. Don't let me stop you. I'm going to talk about this one that you can use with oppositional or defiant children, which is what we see a lot with Fizzy Kids. Not just for kids who maybe have pathological demand avoidance disorder, but also children who have been through a lot of stress or a traumatic situation. Being oppositional or defiant is actually a way of showing they need control of a situation. So I use this phrase, I would like you to. I would like you to turn the TV off now because it's dinner. Now, the beauty of I would like you to is that you're giving them time to respond. And it's really important to remember that children can take between about 8 and 15 seconds to respond to a question or a request. So if you're one of those parents, like I was, up until very recently, you kind of like, well, I've said I want you to come to the table. Turn the TV off. I said, turn the TV off. Turn the TV off. So you're just saying things over and over again, but actually you haven't given them a chance to respond. So I would like you to turn the TV off. Full stop. Wait for 10 seconds. If they don't turn the TV off, you can say it again. If they still don't turn the TV off, you could say something like, I can see you're finding it hard to do what mummy's asked. I wonder what it is that's stopping you from turning the TV off right now. So it gives you a route to try and get beyond the opposition, but in a calmer and more regulated way, which in our house has been a really powerful kind of thing, because day-to-day opposition, constant opposition and defiance is utterly exhausting to deal with as a parent. All right, guys, well, thank you for having me on today. Just a quick wrap up now. Relearning your parenting language, most importantly, can help you as the parent and your mental health, because it helps you to regulate your own feelings and reactions towards your child. So these phrases, like we said, are designed to put you back in charge, to keep your thinking brain switched on, to prevent you having behavioural problems just because your child has them. I felt like I had behavioural problems for a long time, actually, when I had my children and before I really understood them. So it's so good for you. It's so good to give you that control and that feeling that you're trying your best as a parent again, and that you're getting to the end of the day having done the best job you can do. And these kids are hard. Fizzy Kids are really wonderful, but really hard to deal with. So be kind to yourself. Secondly, relearning this parenting language can also help your child to learn to better manage their big feelings and behaviours. And that is our ultimate goal. And it's a long-term game. It really is a long-term game, but it's worth it. 5 years into doing this, my children are pretty much different children. And I always say, autism, learning difficulties, behavioural difficulties, emotional difficulties, they're not an excuse, but they are an explanation. They're an explanation of why our children do what they do and say what they say, but they're also an explanation for why we need to relearn our parenting techniques with them. And as the cool dude Carl Albrecht said, and he pretty much sums up my entire workshop in this phrase, he says, change your language and you change your thoughts. And I couldn't agree more. It really is transformational, just taking back control of the language that you use with your kids. Thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate you having me on tonight. I know you have a busy schedule with workshops and all the rest of it. Very quickly, what's new? We have 2 online live workshops in November. Well, we have 3 actually, but you've got the first one for free. You can book on our website. The ones that I do online are £22.50. I've got one on the angry child and one on language for the anxious child, and you can book on our website. We are also putting together online on-demand courses. They're going to take a few more weeks to get going, but if you subscribe to our newsletter on our website, which is www.fizzykids.co.uk, then you can stay up to date with all the new stuff. We also do monthly newsletters where I just share thoughts, tips, ideas. And we have an awesome collaboration with a company called Happy Confident Company. Now they publish these awesome books and cards, packs of cards, which help children to learn more about their brains and how they work, and more about their big feelings and how they can learn to kind of manage them and get superpowers around managing their big feelings. I also do lots of little reels and posts on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And we also have a podcast for those of you who like to listen in audio. So thank you. It's been wonderful to meet you. Thank you, Tam, for having me on.